And I'm joined again by Nick Marchal-Tencioni, the leader of the UKIP party, and critically, one of the only politicians in this country who has been prepared to stand up for the lack of justice being dished out to those poor souls who were unwittingly caught up in the unrest following the Southport massacre. Watch him feeling pretty despondent, actually, after attending one of the court hearings.
On a personal note, I feel absolutely sick to my stomach with regards to what I've witnessed at Winchester Crown Court this morning. The barrister phoned the defendant that I know last night to manage expectations. If you plead not guilty, or if you enter no plea, you're going to be remanded. In what world does that happen where he's committed no violent crime? The CCTV footage is incredibly questionable with regards to implicating criminality. The case is far more complicated than that. The individual was present, but he didn't commit any crimes. Then that this morning, again, you've got to make a decision. What do you want to do? Do you want to enter no plea? Do you want to say guilty, not guilty? Essentially, either way, you're being remanded. You're going to prison. It's just, I'm sick to my stomach. A 65-year-old man has also just been, his wife was there, his children were there. 7 families, 6 out of the 7, 6 families, mothers, ordinary concerned citizens, their brothers and sisters, the sons and daughters, they're all heartbroken now. They're all devastated. These are people that you know, that I know. They're your neighbours. They're the people you chat to, work colleagues. These are ordinary people who haven't engaged in any criminality. They were simply there at the time.
And Nick Marchal-Tencioni, that is the critical point, isn't it? You're not defending violent criminals. I'm not defending violent criminals, but I absolutely will defend people who quite clearly are political prisoners being made an example of in the mainstream media and being punished in inhumane ways, as you say, in some cases for simply being at the scene of a crime, which is not a crime, but they're told, oh, plead guilty. That's the only way that you'll avoid a long prison sentence. Or, Nick, and this is a thing that has really got me, people like Julie Sweeney, Lucy Connolly, mothers, pensioners, housewives, carers, locked up for months on end for an inartful post on X or Facebook. And no one, Nick, outside of you and maybe me and a few others are speaking up for these poor souls.
Absolutely, Dan. So let me be very, very clear to maximize our time together for your viewers. If you have no knowledge of the British legal system, if you've never been in a Crown Court before, if you've never dealt with a solicitor, let alone a barrister before, when you are violent disorder is used specifically because it carries the 5-year mark, it's used specifically to quash. When in 2011 we had the same sort of thing with the riots, it's designed to paralyze you with fear. So if you're in an assault or in a fray, everyone sort of knows the score. If you've got no previous form and no one got hurt, you're going to do some community service, say you're sorry, smack on the wrist, no one got hurt. But violent disorder is there. It's used specifically to paralyze you. You need 3 people present. Just need 3 people there. How on earth they prove who was part of the group isn't relevant. You just need 3 people there. And of course, you've got all these protests happening up and down the country against illegal immigration, and rightly so. And going back to the thrust of our argument, 99% of it is peaceful. 99% of it is people saying, we are frustrated, we are angry, we are sick of it. Going back to the winter fuel allowance and the money that gets spent in directions that it shouldn't be going in, when it should actually be going to heat pensioners. We're at absolute breaking point. So let's be very clear for your viewers. When the individual is contacted by the police and they've never dealt with the police before, they are paralyzed by fear. That's what happens. And they don't want to think about it. This is the stages of the process. They don't want to think about it. Then they have a court date. In the case where riots or unrest or protests happen, it comes by very quickly. So all they've got to do is just bury their head in the sand. These poor souls rock up at a Crown Court. Again, very intimidating. A lot of bags are packed in case you're going out the back in a Securical van. And it's the first time you're going to speak to the barrister. Now, I knew that was going to happen for the 7 last Wednesday at Winchester Crown Court. For the individual that I knew that was likely the case. I didn't know everything about his background, but I likely the case. So I sat there with him and the barrister, and this is what happened for your listeners. The barrister said, whether you plead guilty or not guilty, you are being, this was a plea hearing, Dan. It was not sentencing. It was a plea hearing. There's over 1,000 arrests, over 500 charges, and over 100 people have gone to prison. So what percentage of those people who are potentially going to be found not guilty at trial are now serving in prison? This is what she said, verbatim. Whether you plead guilty or not guilty, this is a plea hearing, not sentencing. You are going to be remanded. Now, if you plead guilty, as you know, it's 50% in the UK that you serve. That's been dropped to 40% now. And then there's whatever the 33% off. So let's face it. You're terrified. You're paralyzed by fear. You, in the case of the people that have been involved in what we call a non-violent violent disorder. So yes, they were there, but they've done nothing wrong. And potentially they are of good character and they've got no previous. You're sat there 20 minutes to go until that bell goes where you're going into court and you're being told no matter what you do, you're going to prison. So you've got two choices. You can have a longer sentence or a shorter sentence. Mm-hmm. 99% of people who are inoculated by fear and who don't know the system, who have grieving, crying mothers, sisters, aunties, family members there, are going to say, just plead guilty. Just end this, please. And that is exactly what my forecast was. And that is what I saw. And I spoke to the defendant who I know, and I said, if you've seen the footage, if you are sure that you are innocent, if you're sure you did nothing wrong, if you're not guilty, I am 99% certain, knowing what I know about the legal system, about this case, that you will not be remanded. No judge can remand you on a not guilty plea with the prisons at max for a non-violent violent disorder. And lo and behold, the 6 that pleaded guilty, they're all in prison now. Bearing in mind, it was a plea hearing, not sentencing. They're all in prison before they've been sentenced. And the chap that said, I'm not guilty, I'm going to fight this, he was not remanded. He is free to be back with his daughters, with his family. And guess when his sentencing is? Guess when his trial starts? April next year. Well, Yvette Cooper might not be Home Secretary next year. Keir Starmer might not be in position next year. We might have realised that by releasing
and he'll get the evidence, won't he? He'll get the evidence. People will be able to see the CCTV footage, and he will be able to prove that he was not involved in the violence and clear his name, and please God, not end up in prison. So I guess your message, Nick, is don't plead guilty simply because the authorities are pressuring you to do so, because it is part of a bigger political plot and you're being used as a pawn. And you're being used as a pawn, aren't you, to strike fear in the heart of people who, for example, support UKIP.
Absolutely, and I'd like to link that to, again, that devastating 15 minutes where you've done a great job there, Dan, just really painting the picture. But again, the outrage. There is an agenda happening. No one quite understands why a man like Starmer would do this. Why communism is now here in Britain, that all those Labour voters are probably rubbing their hands with glee. They're not looking at it thinking, oh, maybe one or two perhaps, but they're not looking at it thinking, oh, we've made a terrible mistake here earlier this year. What have we done? We've voted a communist in. So the reality is that there is an agenda at play here, going back to the winter fuel allowance, 33 billion to Ukraine, 11.6 billion on African climate aid, 11 billion to the unions, 8 billion on energy, 10 billion on public sector wages. There's so much money to go around. There is an agenda, 21 billion on unemployed migrants, a billion or two on housing illegals. There's more than enough money to go around. There's an agenda at play, and that agenda, first and foremost, very clever. It's communism. It's to paralyze you with fear. If you're not guilty, stop.
Exactly. And I wanted to show a bit of a video of you on the streets, Nick, proving that it is possible. It is possible to take your message to the streets and do so in a completely legal and safe manner. Have a look at this.
No one voted for mass, uncontrolled immigration. No one voted for illegals, for invaders to break into our country, to be facilitated by the establishment. No one voted for that. Tell them what you want to say. Tell the government what you want to... What do you want them to hear? Tell them!
And Nick, Calvin Robinson, Father Calvin Robinson, who is now your chief spokesperson, but also a regular on this show, and also Douglas Murray, the Spectator columnist. Both of them have been clear that you cannot be too afraid to take to the streets as long as you are doing so peacefully. Do you agree with that? First, though, have you ever wondered what happened to the legendary Chuck Norris? Now, I recently saw a video he made, and I was shocked. He's in his 80s and still kicking butt, working out, and staying active. What's even more shocking is he's stronger, can work out longer, and even has plenty of energy left over for his grandkids. He did this by making just one change. He says he still feels like he's in his 50s. His wife even started doing this one thing too, and she's never felt better. She says she feels 10 years younger, her body looks leaner, and she has energy all day. Chuck made a special video that explains everything. Make sure you watch it by going to chuckdefense.com/outspoken or by clicking on the link in the show notes below this video or on the QR code on screen. It will change the way you think about your health. Once again, that's chuckdefense.com/outspoken. Click on the link in the show notes below to watch the video now. You simply won't believe it. Just a reminder, the legendary Chuck Norris is a whopping 84 years old and yet has more energy than me. He discovered he could create dramatic changes to his health simply focusing on 3 things that sabotage our body as we age. Watch his method by clicking on the link in the description box below, but the address, chuckdefense.com/outspoken.
Absolutely. So after the Hare Hills incident and the Southport slaying, there was a motivation, there was an impetus for people to be on the street, and rightly so, saying we've had enough of this. So it's your democratic right to peaceful protest. So let's be absolutely clear. If you don't have your right to protest, and if you don't have, most importantly, free speech, you do not have democracy. Simple. So there was a huge impetus, and it was my absolute pleasure to stand shoulder to shoulder with the ordinary hardworking man saying we are absolutely sick to death of that. And 99% of what I saw being on the front line was peaceful. On the Patriot side, we were constantly telling people to keep their cool, to keep their calm, to respect police orders, like so many other Patriots that are involved in bringing people together to find their voice and to stand strong as Patriots against the evil that we face. And in the case of Plymouth, the far left, typically they're referred to as Socialist Worker Party or Antifa, they stood on the church there in the centre. I think it's St. Mary's, but they stood on the church there. They tore up graves, they dismantled headstones, and they threw the missiles at us, whilst the police faced off to us and had their backs to the far left. They refused. It didn't matter how hard I asked them or shouted, arrest them, arrest them. They didn't want to know. So it's always peaceful, guys. That's it. If you're involved in criminality, you're going to face the full extent of the law. But that's 99. It's 1%. And 99% of people are frustrated and they want to have their voices heard, like you just saw in that clip in Bournemouth there. So if you're involved in criminality, then you're going to have to face the consequences. But for the 99%, these people are angry. They are frustrated. They're not being listened to. It's not just by the current government, it's by the establishment. You can't let the Tories off the hook here for what they've done and what they've allowed. They've passed the baton over to with Labour. And what's happening to those poor souls now who are in prison? I'm dealing with families who have an 18-year-old, families who have a 65-year-old in there. These people don't have form. They're not violent criminals. They were just at that time, not even in the wrong place at the wrong time, but just there at that time.
Well, I think they are political prisoners. I really do think they are political prisoners. And I know some people say that's hyperbole, but it's not when you look at the individual cases. But I think it's been a very dark day, Nick. So what I wanted to do to wrap is actually have a little laugh, but do it in a way that actually pulls together perfectly the arguments that we've both been making today. So luckily, two of my favorite comedians delivered. First, here's Andrew Lawrence on the madness of the prisoner release.
Hello, as you can see, I'm back inside again, doing a stretch for posting online videos with humorous intent, being willfully mischievous on the internet, causing reckless endangerment to people's feelings, spreading far-right conspiracy theories thinly veiled as jokes. Thought I'd got away with it, to be honest. Didn't think they were going to be able to find any prison space for me, but luckily today they've just released 1,700 dangerous criminals early, so they've got plenty of room to accommodate people posting spicy memes on social media. And now it's just me and a load of middle-aged white blokes who've got carried away on Facebook, all doing a bit of jail time. Sadly, since they released all the real criminals, there is a shocking lack of diversity in prisons up and down the country. Before long, it's going to be whiter than the Arctic Circle in here, to be honest with you. Very soon, prison will be the only place in the UK that isn't multicultural. Still, the chances of getting stabbed have just decreased dramatically. The warden said to think of it less as a prison, more as a re-education centre. We're all going to be forced to watch BBC News for 12 hours a day and offer up our thanks to Chairman Keir before every meal.
And watching BBC News for 12 hours a day, wow, that really is punishment. Dapper Laughs was brilliant on this too.
They just released me early. Your boy's out. I'm free at last. Hey, look. Yes. Hey, apparently there's been like a mad influx of OAPs posting like hurty words and naughty memes on Facebook, you know, so they get themselves nicked so they don't freeze to death over the winter. So they're getting in there to get warm, you know. Now Keir Starmer's killing them off by taking away their winter fuel allowance. Luckily, I'm one of the 1,700 prisoners being released early today. You know, I was doing 5 years for an armed robbery. Nothing serious. Just popped into HSBC with a little sawn-off shotgun. Bosh, done the security guard, nicked a bit of dough. I ain't gonna lie though, I'm gonna miss Wandsworth Prison. It's one of the best ones.
Nick, you have to laugh sometimes, don't you? In these extraordinarily dystopian times, at least it's bringing out some good comedy, pointing out the absurdity of this whole thing.
I appreciate the sentiment very much so, but in 5 years' time, we're voting our way out of this. So we're going to start the UKIP roadshow. We're going to be taking it to the public, and we're going to be looking to reignite that support that once was. So outrage is at max. Now it's time for activity and output to be at max.
Brilliant stuff. Well, look, we look forward to keeping in touch and having you appear much more on Outspoken in the future. That is Nick Marchal Tencioni, the new leader of UKIP.